Morning. Hello, April. It's so fun to be here on the first night of the month because, as Dr. Bob just told us, we've got a brand new theme. And I love that play on words. It's not practice what we preach, because we don't really preach here. We teach. This is a teaching center based, as everyone knows, on the principles of science of mind. And as Dr. Bob just told us, what we mean by practice is spiritual practice. A lot of what we teach is about applying these principles by using spiritual practice in our daily lives. So for the next 5 Sundays in April, there's 5 weeks in April, 5 Sundays, we are going to explore a different spiritual practice each Sunday. So visualization is what I get to talk about today. Now, Barbara gave us a great definition: forming mental images in our mind with our imagination. So before I dive into what a great spiritual tool this is and why it works, and give tips for how to use it to live our best lives, I thought we would just do one. We are going to do a visualization exercise together. Now, all you really have to do is listen. So whether you're here in the room or you're watching online at home, just relax and be comfortable in your seat. Release any tension that you're holding in your body. Maybe roll your shoulders back and just take a nice breath. And if you would, close your eyes. I want you to visualize and imagine that you're seated at a table, and on the table in front of you is a plate. On the plate is an apple. It can be any kind of apple. Make it your favorite kind. Is it a green apple or a red one? Look at the apple from all its sides. Pick it up in your hand and feel it. Turn it around. Look very closely at it. Observe its skin. Is it smooth or rough? Is it shiny? Are there any holes in it or bruises? Focus on the details. Now, bring it up to your nose and smell the apple. Is it fragrant? Does it smell like it's ripe and delicious? Now, set the apple down on the plate in front of you and pick up a knife and cut the apple in half. Observe the details. Can you smell it even more now? What color is the inside of your apple? Do you see any seeds? Is the color maybe beginning to darken already and change because of the air? Bring the piece of apple to your mouth and take a bite. Taste the apple in your mouth. Is it sweet, juicy, mushy, crunchy? Eat as much as you like. Now, open your eyes. Is anybody's mouth salivating? Yes, right? Isn't that so neat? Your mouth waters when you do this exercise and visualize something like this. Because you went there in your mind and imagined eating an apple, your body, in this case your mouth, doesn't know the difference. You had that physiological effect anyway, and your mouth watered even though you really didn't eat anything. Experimental psychologists have proven that the human nervous system cannot tell the difference between the actual experience and the experience that is imagined. That is why so many people use this spiritual practice of visualization. It's become quite popular with the law of attraction and the Secret book and the movie that came out several years ago. It's a spiritual practice based on the power and energy of the universe. There's a connection between the power of our mind and the outpicturing of our imagined, visualized thought. So it doesn't just apply to our salivating mouth. It applies to everything. The apple visualization is a great example because the result is fairly instant. Your mouth waters right away when you experience that effect as if you've actually eaten the apple. But we can use this visualization tool with anything in our lives, with our physical health, our abundance, our relationships, our material possessions, our jobs, and our general success and well-being. So I'm going to talk about some of the best ways and methods to visualize, tips and guidelines to follow, as if I know what I'm talking about. But the truth is that there are three main people who I've learned all this stuff from. Ernest Holmes, duh. Neville Goddard, who, if you're not familiar with him, he was a New Thought author and lecturer. And Mike Dooley. Mike Dooley runs a website called tut.com. It's The Universe Talks is what it stands for, T-U-T, tut.com. And he sends out daily inspirational messages and is a great author and teacher about visualization and manifestation. So let's start with our founder, Ernest Holmes. Here is a bit of trivia for you. The word visualize only appears in the Science of Mind textbook 3 times, according to the concordance. And the word visualization never appears in the Science of Mind. He didn't really use the word visualization, but he did frequently write about the power of our imagination. And as Barbara told us too, he also liked that term mental equivalence. We know that when we are imagining, we are visualizing. So Ernest Holmes clearly understood the power of this practice. One of my favorite things that Ernest Holmes said about this subject, and oh great, got the quote up, is the possibility of life is inherent within the capacity to imagine what life is. It is not a question of failing or succeeding. It is simply a question of sticking to an idea until it becomes a tangible reality. I loved the way he phrased that, sticking to an idea until it becomes a reality. Because visualization is something you can do over and over again, you do stick to it and practice it, as opposed to saying a spiritual mind treatment where you say your words and you give thanks and you're done and you release it. So it's a little bit differently. Visualization can be done repetitively. And Ernest Holmes wrote about that, there must be purpose to our imagination because it is that important and powerful. Our imagination, what we are thinking about and focused on in our mind, creates our reality. Now, Neville Goddard was a New Thought author and mystic whose books and lectures came out about 20 years after Ernest Holmes wrote The Science of Mind. Neville Goddard believed that our human imagination is God, our Christ consciousness. And I remember when I first read some of his books, I thought, this guy's really out there. But the more I read and the more I thought about it, the more it actually made sense. Because if you think about it, in the one consciousness of God, we know all things are possible. I think we all stand in agreement with that. But if I say, hold on a minute, guys, I'm going to go outside and flap my arms and fly around the building, I can't do that. We know that's not really possible. But it is possible in my imagination. I can imagine that I can do that. So from our human perspective, the only way that all things are possible is in our imagination. So I think Neville Goddard is right. Our imagination is the unlimited, all things are possible power of creation. Not that I think I'm going to go fly around the building. Neville suggested that the key to visualization is to feel yourself having, doing, or being whatever the thing is that you desire. When we claim our desires in our consciousness, when we lose ourselves in the feeling of being the thing we desire, that quality or experience will embody itself in our world. He suggested that we imagine specific dramas in our mind. That's what he called them, dramas. But they're really just imagined scenes. For instance, if there's a goal that you want to accomplish, you imagine that someone you know is congratulating you on completing your task. Hear their words complimenting you, telling you, great job, and feel their handshake or their hug. You make it so real in your imagination that you feel a response in your body. You feel as if you are in that moment of accomplishment. Another great thing Neville Goddard discussed is the importance of sleep, and really the time just before we fall asleep. Sleep is the natural state of the subconscious mind. So that last 5 minutes before we fall asleep is the best time to direct our thoughts and visualize our desires. Now, usually we go to bed and what do? We review the day's disappointments, don't we? We think about all the bad things that happened that day as we're falling asleep. Don't do that. What we should do instead is take that time to assume the feeling of our wish fulfilled. Now, you realize that we used to do this naturally as children. Like, remember when there was an event coming up? Like, for me, it was Christmas or my birthday or grandparents coming to visit or a vacation. And you couldn't wait for this thing. So you would go to bed at night and you couldn't sleep. So you would think about it and dream about it and try to imagine these things happening. And then the thing eventually came to pass. It's the same thing. Mike Dooley, as I said, is an author and entrepreneur who created tut.com. And he made a documentary about visualization several years ago called Thoughts Become Things. And I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime if you ever want to check it out. He tells fun, engaging stories from his life about using visualization to win awards, to obtain the job that he liked, to travel the world. And he gives guidelines for this practice. And they're things like only visualize once a day for no more than 5 to 10 minutes at a time. He says to imagine every detail by using your senses. So when you're imagining whatever this outcome is that you desire, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? And of course, most importantly, how do you feel? He suggests you visualize with emotion, meaning feel the joy and happiness of your desire being received. You want your mind to know what it feels like so that we have the mental equivalent in place. He reminds us to put yourself in the picture when you're visualizing. So if you're visualizing, don't forget to see yourself in the scene that you're seeing. Don't just watch it unfold, be in it and be a part of it. He tells us to dwell on the end result. Don't concern yourself with the hows. He calls them the cursed hows. We don't have to visualize how we will obtain our desired result. That's not our concern and it's not our issue. We don't want to limit or restrict the universe with how we will get there. It's always going to be better than we could possibly imagine anyway. Now, lastly, he tells us, never imagine what you don't want. That means no thoughts of something you don't want to materialize. We can use the spiritual practice of visualization for anything. A lot of athletes use visualization because when athletes run their event or play their sport in their mind, the same muscles in their body fire in the same sequence as if they're running and performing in reality. Now, as we saw earlier, if you go there in the mind, you go there in the body. It's like extra practice for them, and they end up improving. Now, I have been visualizing something that has not happened yet. But I know that this is a community that supports me, and I know that you will celebrate with me when this demonstration happens. So I feel like it's okay to talk about this. I have been using visualization to help materialize my book. I have a manuscript that is being sent next week to be formatted, and it will be published in July. Big deal. I'm very excited about it. But I am visualizing actively getting the proof from the publisher and opening that envelope and seeing that cover and holding that book in my hands. And when I visualize this, I get tears of joy in my eyes because I know that's how I will feel. You guys remember Reverend Angela Harmon was here a couple months ago promoting her book, and we chatted, and she said publishing a book is like birthing a baby. And it is. You cry then, too. So that is how excited and joyful I feel when I visualize that. So my question for you is, what puts tears of joy in your eyes? What can you use this spiritual practice tool to create? Maybe it's not a book for you. Maybe it's a new car. Maybe it's a house, a new job, a relationship, vibrant health. There is no limit. I do want to touch on visualizing health for a moment because that can be challenging. If you have a disease or an illness, or you're experiencing symptoms and you're feeling lousy, you're sick. And it's kind of like saying, oh, well, just visualize and pretend you're not. That sounds like really insensitive advice. I have a friend who's, I want to be careful how I say this, I have a friend whose body is experiencing cancer right now. And every month she goes into, it's not every month, I think it's every few months. She goes into the magic tube and gets her scans to see how things are going. It's just the scariest thing ever. I truly hope that none of us ever have to deal with that. But visualization is one of the spiritual practices that I've been teaching her. She visualizes the scan results she wants to see. She writes the script of the report and imagines herself receiving it and reading it. And more importantly, she imagines vividly how she will feel when it says the tumors have shrunk however much or that she is now cancer-free. So there are ways to use visualization even with something very scary like a health concern. And here's the last thing I want to share with you that we have to remember about visualization, and that is we do it all the time, whether we realize we're doing it or not. And we know that the law works even when we don't understand it or we're not conscious of our use of it. So when we are visualizing negative experiences and outcomes that we don't want, we get negative experiences and outcomes that we don't want. We often visualize problems and arguments. Have you ever planned a fight with somebody in your head? We've all done that, right? We visualize our fears, sometimes accidentally. Yesterday, I live in Rome about 2 hours from here, and yesterday it was really windy. We had gusts up to 40 miles an hour. And our backyard is surrounded by trees. We've got an empty lot behind us and next to us, and they're all trees. And I was sitting in my backyard watching the trees sway in the wind, and it was so beautiful. And I kid you not, I actually had this thought, wow, if that tree snapped and fell, it would land right in our pool. Like, I actually had that thought, and I caught myself right away. We have to be very aware of what we're imagining. If what you are visualizing isn't serving you, stop doing it. Easier said than done. You can always replace them with new visualizations. Now, as a collective, humanity tends to visualize conflict in the world. How many of you actively spend time imagining and visualizing people living in harmony and peace? Probably not many of us. Why don't we do this? It's the easiest thing in the world to do. As you're falling asleep and imagining the life you want, remember to visualize the world you want to live in, the harmony, the love, and the peace. If we don't visualize what it can look like and be like, how will it ever happen? If we experienced it in our mind, we are likely to experience it in our conditions. A lot of spiritual practice is work, but I feel like this one isn't. I think visualization is a lot of fun, and I have fun with it, and I hope that you guys have fun with it as well. So thank you very much for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Yay!